Hello. I shall be right with you. I know it's a little bit late, but as you can see, we have the fire going already. And here we are. So today, oh, hello. Oh, I know why that did that. Give me a moment. I was busy doing something else, and so I guess I'm slightly discombobulated, maybe? There we go. Coding stream. It is possible that I will also solve the problem with the stream dropping, because it turns out I had an internet outage the other day. It just kind of went wrong on me, and hopefully it'll act better now. Might even act better so much that I won't need to have the window be giant anymore. Fussing with stuff. On this laptop, I was attending the Godot audio meeting. Assume I am making sound, and it looks like I'm making sound, and the sound is coming through just fine. Phone. If that phone rings, I might end up having to run off and do entirely something else, and we'll see. Because this is going to be a week for me. Let's do the thing of adjusting the size of this and seeing whether it's still a problem with the stream or not. Because in theory, I should be able to do that, or even do it here as well. How many of me can you stand? Yeah, close enough. So in theory, if this is actually working properly, then maybe I can have that window not be huge, and it'll still stream. Because if the problem was the router flaking out and being weird, well, then that won't be happening right now. And people can see what's actually being done a little bit better. When am I going to film myself drumming again like I used to? Possibly this summer. It may be that I can get that together. I'm actively looking towards being able to do more in the way of like live jamming and recording and making music. Right now, a little more. Right, funny how you mentioned rocking out. What I have on screen is going to be a reverb plugin entitled K Rockstar, because I have a largish room that acts a little bit like my guitar hall rooms, and I'm looking to work out what I can do for the reverbs of 2026 that are more along the lines of what I'd like to experiment with. I've got some specific ideas in mind. In particular, one of the things I'd like to experiment with that state variable filter that I just picked up. I'm wondering whether I can make that sound good for deep reverb fields, or perhaps whether the special version of it that I'm doing works better for that. It might, because it's taking the low pass and subtracting the band pass, but the band pass is also then sinized, meaning that there will be more of an expandy effect on the low pass, and that might be what's giving it the sound that it has. It's worth a try. And then the other thing I'm thinking in terms of is I think I'm moving past the point of having the deres and filter and everything, or at least having the filter work quite that way. I'm more interested in going back to some of my earlier experiments with like slightly filtering things in the regeneration path, or there might easily be a thing where I'll have the kind of filtering I'm doing and so forth, and throw some of that on the output of things, and maybe that will have a useful effect. But I've got a batch of new possible reverb concepts. I went through and I picked out all the ones that really seemed to be doing something and copied them over to verbs.txt. And at this point, I believe I can stop generating more of those and start working with these ones that I've made. So smallest one, and the letter next to it is how free of discontinuities it is. Like D and C and so on, that's a very flat reverb pattern. But then when they depart from flat, sometimes it's in a useful direction. So, K dry room is one of the best really small rooms I've had yet. Oh, if you like K wood room, I have a one that's coming up that you're going to love. K mansion was initially called The Grange because I thought it sounded like Headley Grange. In other words, the house that Led Zeppelin 4 was recorded in. But I decided that maybe I didn't want to push it that far, but it's going to involve some special tinkering to see what I can get it to do. K Barn has a real interesting, it's the same kind of thing as K Woodroom, that it has that, I'm going to need to work on the location in the room thing as well. Because currently what I'm doing is reassigning all of the maximum lengths, and I need to override that stuff a little bit so that I can clean up changes in there. Right now, if you yank that control around, yank the position control around rather than letting it set, there can be artifacts and funny noises, and it can store energy, and then as you re-expand it to a larger setting, it can pop over to the larger setting again, making a noise where there was silence. So I need to update that so that the position control can be manipulated on the fly, because it's going to find its way into things like the Godot engine. It's going to find its way into things where the use case is going to be, here is a footstep noise, and we're going to repeatedly sound that footstep noise and have it walk farther into the room to go along with stuff that a game engine is doing. So I'm going to need to make position handle that more gracefully. I probably don't need to make it perfect. The Godot engine conversation was actually quite interesting, because it was all people talking about there's a little fade out thing in the drivers of the actual engine itself, funnily enough, where if it runs out of samples, it runs a 64 sample delay buffer and then fades rather than simply cutting out if the sample buffer runs dry. 64 samples is not enough to actually do that effectively. It's still going to be a pop. And people were talking about like, oh, we'll use an FFT in order to simulate what the continuation of the frequency should actually be. Yeah, in theory that'll work, but it'll be horrible. And the guy who's a primary coder on Godot, who was deeply involved in that and thinking about doing various things, somebody who's much more familiar with coding the Godot architecture than coding audio programs. So it was really good to be there and be able to share some of like what I know about those contexts. And because he's like, oh, okay, so if we suddenly run out of samples, we can generate some more samples and we'll just record the previous samples and then continue that curve as it goes. And maybe we can continue the waveform as it goes. That's a world of hurt. Suppose you feed it white noise. You're very likely to create a reconstructed sample that goes flying way off into the heavily distorted territories. So I was able to issue a warning like that and go maybe just taper down the sound from the last point where you had a sample. And also pointing out that if you are taking a sine wave and then you wait until it hits a zero cross and then cut the sound, that is not a clickless cutoff. There is a click because it goes from being in a sine wave to suddenly flat. So that's a corner. That said, that's not necessarily such a bad thing. Oh, you got some new headphones? Cool. Hell yeah. I'm not a big headphone recordist, but I like having ones that do the job. So yeah, I've got K-Barn coming. K-Monastery is going to be interesting because I've got my heart set on a particular experiment that is a little bit like the way I'm doing denormalization. Rich Hall, Deep Forest will be much less sustaining. Oh, I had that experience. The thing that I ended up getting to was when I switched to Yamaha NS10s, I then understood the complaints people had about mixes I had done, because then I could hear it. And yeah, that is a relatable problem. Clear Hall, we've got a variety of different halls and things. K Luxury, it's kind of glossy sounding. And this is the one I want to work on today. It's a C K Rockstar. It is very free of weird frequency irregularities, but that makes it sound kind of glossy, and it's also like it's 1,000 seaters, so it's rather large. Deep Hall, larger still. Velvet Hall, that's down on the high frequencies, so you might well imagine why you would think it was like that. Smooth Hall just blurs and diffuses things out a little bit more and is even larger. And then the largest one is K Cavernous. And all of these are reverb plugins that I can get happening, but I'm going to want to tailor and adjust all of their filterings and all of their things to that particular plugin. And that there's quite a bit to that, actually. So the first thing I'm going to do in order to get this done is, having just made that so that it has a subtype, because it needs to have its little ID number, we're going to copy over Woodroom and start with that. If I can duplicate Woodroom, I can then start adjusting it and doing stuff with it. And one of the things that's going to happen is some of these controls won't be there anymore. I'm actually wondering whether even early RF is going to be part of this new vision. I'm thinking it might just end up being regen, position, and dry wet. Because I'm leaning into the K is what I associate with constants. And the original concept for these reverbs was that they would be very sophisticated and do a lot of interesting things, but in such a way that it just delivered a particular kind of sound and put you in that space. And however much of it you included in the mix is what you would get. Yeah, fair enough, Bonnie. Fair enough. Absolutely try that out. There's a lot of neat things that you can try out in electronic digital audio. There's that DAW that lives in a terminal. I'm forgetting the name of that one because I did not end up playing with it, but I remember bumping into that. So let's see, Pragma Woodroom parameters, and then from there to there. And that'll be one way of getting this started. I'm going to have to recode this early and make it out of the Rockstar one. What I'm really hot to do is an idea that, like I said on Blue Sky, I'm guardedly very excited about this. It occurs to me that one of the problems with reverbs being realistic is that realism in reverbs occupies a physical space. There's no such thing as a reverb that doesn't occupy physical air. And one of the things about spaces is they tend not to have perfect soundproofing. And even if they had really good soundproofing from the outside, there's going to be a degree to which, like, temperature differences at different places in the room will lead to air currents circulating. In other words, a live space has room tone. And room tone can be considered to be variations on noise, and I can produce noise, but it's not that you're going to want a blast of white noise. You're going to want basically Brownian noise, and that's like also known as drunkard's walk. It will be very easy to come up with because I'll have like noise sources that are easily available there. I will probably want that to be essentially centered because the purpose is making it activate the reverb rather than just being essentially a noise source that can include deep frequencies using the technique that I use for Voice of the Starship. And it'll require a little bit of tinkering to get it to work. And it'll be at threshold levels. Like, I'm looking to literally the amplitude of noise as it would exist in a real space when nothing is making any sound. Not the microphone's noise, not the recording system's noise, literally the noise of the room. Because every room does have room tone, and that's literally what it is the sound of the noise of air and wind and Brownian motion of air molecules. It can be at a very, very, very quiet level, but there's never nothing. Especially in big rooms, because you're going to have air circulation in big rooms. So, Ruprecht, the thing about a reverb interacting with other instruments in the room is, I'd need to know what you meant by that. There are a number of things that could be done. Modeling, the stuff that I'm doing is not about modeling 3D spaces like rendering them in a 3D image. Rather, I'm generating reverbs out of householder delay networks and sculpting those to produce the results I want. And there's a bunch of different ways that I can optimize or fail to optimize those. One of the things I'm doing is I'm making it entirely out of comb filters without any all-pass filters ever. Because there aren't any all-pass filters in nature. At least I'm pretty sure there's not any all-pass filters in. But it's like real-world stuff that's made out of just combs, but in far larger quantities than you normally get in a reverb. So that's how I'm going about doing that. One of the things that could happen with other instruments in the room is supposing one of the instruments is a snare drum. Here, as long as there are people here. Here's a snare drum. Sounds in the room can rattle the snares. And the reason I brought this down from the drum room is because I wanted to show you my shibari snare. I'm doing a new thing with this, and I'm looking forward to playing it. This, as you can plainly hear, low frequency. This is not a tightly stretched snare head. It's not a high pitched. It's a very low pitched. But I've tensioned it using these leather straps rather than the tension rods. And the reason is that these are somewhat flexible. I've got it going up and down between the lugs here and the rim. And then I ran the strip around to loop into these and pull them together, which was enough to tension it. Let's see if I can release this snare so that you can hear what it actually rings like. Can't be done. Can't be done. We cannot lower this enough. Oh wait, maybe we can. Okay. So that's what the batter head sounds like. Resonant head, higher pitched. And when you put the snares back on, snare drum. So the reason I'm doing that thing with the leather straps is because there's an experiment that I'm trying to do with it. And as near as I can tell, I can't demonstrate it now because it would make a noise that was far too loud. But the reason I am doing that is because if you have a springy thing like the leather and you nail the snare with a heavy, like hickory 2B stick, well, what's going to happen is it's going to pull the rim up with the pressure of the hit, stretching those leather strips just a bit, and then they will snap back. And what happens is you have a pitch sweep in the snare head for really hard hits, meaning it'll go whoop just a little bit. And it seems to work, and I'm pretty happy with how it's behaving, and I have not recorded it yet. But the idea of having the deep snare, like the slack snare, doing that, honestly, when playing on it, even though I didn't get it recorded, it sounded like I was getting into that like Eagles of the Long Run zone, where you have this doof snare that really acts like a optimal, like heavy rock snare kind of thing. So yeah, that's my shibari snare. And I'm looking forward to getting stuff done with that. I was being asked when I was going to be recording, like showing myself playing drums, which involves getting a camera up into the drum room along with the cables and things, but that's doable. It would be the same camera being used for this. Like, once I'm done with fireplace cam, that can move up and become drum cam. And then it'll stop being fireplace cam, but it's going to we're going to get to the end of the fireplace times soon enough. It's starting to warm up a little bit. Eventually it'll get to where I will be begging for the chill, begging for the coolness that was so easily attained in winter. Anywho, here's the H file for this. And we're going to duplicate this and then start fooling with these things and seeing what we can do about it. I don't know if I'm going to want to gate the room tone. I feel like that's actually not what I'm going to want to do. Because there's all kinds of interesting implications. So let's first go and deal with this. Going to want to remove everything that isn't A through F. It's going to get even simpler as I go. Again, I'm looking to having the derez not be a thing for this year's reverb plugins. We've got a bunch of them out there already that do that. So if you wanted to do a major derez thing, there's always stuff like Alien Spaceship and so on. There's Woodroom. There's a lot of plugins where it'll have access to that filter and so on, but I want to make more bespoke versions of these things going forward. And then these are all the same settings there. So we don't need to change this part, but I do need to delete all of these, otherwise it won't build. If I delete it now, then it doesn't build and cause errors and then freeze up when you try to remove them. We got to do the initialize. That's under reset. Go from here to here. And again, this will not have a filter. Instead, it'll have probably a different kind of filter, and I'm working on what kind I'm going to want to use. I think I'm not going to be using a Bezier filter for this one. And then we duplicate all of this and we're good to go. So we'll go from here on down. This is the kind of stuff I'm going to be bringing into Godot when I get that rolling. And that'll be exciting in its own right. But for now, we're just sort of dealing with we're going to go through the entire process of firstly building this. See if I've got it ready to build. Oh, I have to build it twice. Yeah, bear in mind I have a plugin called Iron Oxide, which is a different kind of tape effect. Rather than being entirely about realism, Iron Oxide is more about constricting the sound into a more narrow band that's kind of overdriven and distorted. That's what that one does. And hey, we successfully built K-Rockstar, so we can remove Woodroom. Leave that there because I'm going to use it. And then we can test that to see if it worked, but it should because it's literally a copy of a working plugin. That's the way I like starting stuff out with stuff that I know works. You should be able to hear what I'm about to do. I just have to go and find the relevant. Oh, a little farther up. KLMNOP. There we go. So all of those are individual and distinct reverb sounds of various qualities. And that's mighty weird that it... Oh, hang on. Let me try that again. Okay. So here we have Woodroom. I'm going to want to have adjustability on regen. We've got stuff like early RF can be exaggerated or pulled back. Position here, I can show you what I was talking about that I'm going to need to figure out a better way of doing. You can hear a faint crackling as I move this control radically. And then, of course, dry wet is just dry wet. So that's all well and good, but I have a specific idea in mind. Namely, we're going to build K Rockstar and at least hear the beginnings of what it's going to sound like. Here's the most recent wooden box code that's coming out. So what I'm going to do here is copy this to another file. And to tell you why, it's because we're going to need to use this. And in fact, I think that might be correct. Maybe. Are these my largest settings? I feel like, yeah, I think my defaults there are the largest sounds, the largest delays I'm going to get. So I can simply paste this in, but then I'm going to have to redefine the other one. What do I mean by the other one? Const int early. So this gets updated to this, but then this now needs to be propagated. See, it starts at a 0 and then it goes all the way to the largest setting. Here's how I get that information. Let's do it like this. Semicolon const int, semicolon space const int, and space. And we're going to replace that with a carriage return. We're going to replace them all. Boop. Now I've got a vertical stack of these. What I'm going to do is end up with nothing but numbers, and then I'm going to sort them, and then I'm going to build them into the initializing array that I'm doing. Of course it's not Van Halen on guitar, silly Rupert, it's me. Typically that's all that is ever. Okay, so more searches. D6 gets replaced with absolutely nothing. And then carriage return Z gets replaced with just carriage return. Boop. Then space equals space gets replaced with absolutely nothing. And then I am simply going to delete this bit on the end. And now all I've got to do is, first let's click back into here. And then do a quick little delete and cursor dance, which goes like this. As long as I don't trip. And I did not have to do anything fancy as far as figuring out magical ways of deleting only letters and not numbers. I didn't have to learn grep. I just had to sit there going ba-da-da, 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 ba-da-da a bunch of times. Now we can sort the lines. Numbers matched by value. And now we can replace carriage return with comma space. And we're almost ready. This goes on the end. And this goes on the beginning because it defines the array that we must use. And it's okay for this array to have the same figures. For instance, I've got 271s in there. It's fine. We just let that be there. And bada boom. Now we have a updated version of that thing. And technically we don't need to define 3 by 3 or 6 by 6 because this is not the plugin verb 6s anymore. And yeah, that ought to do it. Let's see if it worked. Let's see if it worked. You shall hear the new reverb as it is becoming more of a thing. I'm really going to want to fool with the, let's see, don't need you. I'm really going to want to fool with that position control because I actively want to make it so that you can modulate it while sound is playing through it, and then it's still fine. Ooh, I don't even know what Luna is, but I'm sorry you're having troubles with it. Yeah, I'm given to understand there's a bunch of things that are not good for MIDI-based musicians. For instance, Logic is better than Reaper for MIDI-based musicians. Alrighty, let's make sure I've got my ducks in a row here. Build and copy. And welcome to the new reverb, assuming this works, which it probably should. Here's the new reverb. Okay. Oh, I know what's happening. I'm used to hearing this with its unfiltered state, and Woodroom defaults to a filtered state. So there's going to be a couple of changes right away, taking that filter out for one. I designed it to be full range and more reverb than this. Yeah, we're going to have more regen than the bass, because this is a larger room. So the reason it's called Rockstar is it's a big splashy reverb ambience, kind of like K Guitar Hall, only smoother. That's probably respectable as far as maximum amount of reverb to include. And yeah, this is designed to go bright. And it's got a broad frequency range. Guitar sounds. I feel like I hear some funny noise going on there, so that's going to require a little attention too. Clearly. Yeah, something's going wrong there, and it'll be interesting to find out what it is. But right at the moment, I'm going to tinker with things a little bit more. So first things first. I know I want to take that filter out and build it in using a different kind of filter than what we've got here. I don't know whether that filter is the one that's causing a problem. But I do know that I can start working on that purpose, the room tone concept. And we're also going to be losing DRes, but that doesn't require taking anything out so much. And let's see, what have we got here? That is probably about as legit as it needed to be. I'll test later and find out if that's true. If there's a problem with it, I will fix it. And BezF is the thing that I'm not going to be using any longer. So let's see about addressing that. And we're going to take that, but then leave all the rest of this out because we're not using any of that stuff. We're also going to have, interesting. Early reflections are going to matter here, but I'm not sure by how much. That's perhaps a problem for another day. This should be fine the way it is. I'm certainly going to want to figure out a way of blanking out the early reflection buffers as I change the sizes. This stuff is fine the way it is, I believe, but then at the end of it, this doesn't get used. Or at least some aspect of this isn't getting used. So let's see. So that goes in. It's input sample as it goes in. So we're not going to be using this stuff later on. And we're not going to be reassigning it. So we're not going to be using that, are we? Nope, don't think so. So it might just be that that will work. Let's find out. Oh, something got missed there. Ah, there it is. The instantiation. I'm not currently using the room tone thing that I made. It's just sitting there waiting to be used. Okay. Now what do we got? In theory, this does nothing and it'll be brighter. If the theory isn't correct, it's horribly broken or something went wrong. It's louder than it needs to be. Sure enough, does nothing. That part sounds fine, but there was a problem earlier. Let's set it to mostly dry so it's back down a little bit. See if we hear the problem. Okay. Shifting positions does make bad sounds, but there was a clicky noise that sounded like bad buffer lengths that it's not doing now. Okay, that's a solid 12 dB louder than it needs to be. So we got a gain change to do here. Early reflection could also be the same. Ooh, interesting. Minus early reflection? What's this about? Well, that's not where my amplitude problem is, though. My amplitude problem is down here. So here's where we get our full amplitude there. And funnily enough, this is the number I want, because it needs to go from 2.5 to 1.25 to 0.625. That'll take it down 12 dB. That's down 12 dB, which is basically what it needs to be. I don't understand what you mean by compression evaluation search technology. Unless you're talking about the way that my program into the matrix runs through all of those different reverb possibilities and compresses them using, what is it, gzip, whatever's built into Godot. It has a zip that's built into it. And that is taking place in everything that's been being done for 2026. So in that case, it is being evaluated in that way. Also, when I choose among the final reverbs, I'm choosing among ones, and I will have a look at the file sizes that they are producing in the final result and experimenting with that. Let's quickly go and build this and see if I fix the problem that it started out having. Because the rest of it was basically fine, but I want to see how this goes. And then I have an idea as to something that I could do for the output. But one thing at a time, I guess. Here we are again. Okay, that's more what the level needs to be. Because here's the drum, and here's the reverb. They will end up getting loud because regen is so high. You can kind of hear that you got that crackle. In fact, I can demonstrate something else too. Now if I bring it out again, it made a sort of noise. That's what I'm talking about. Here, I'll do it like this, and it'll make it easier for me to demonstrate this point. So at full extension, short position, and I don't have enough time. But if I snap it to long position, okay, I stand corrected. If I move it back and forth, it'll make noises. It's not doing it quite as enthusiastically as I'd hoped, but it is still doing it to some extent anyhow. So, next order, well, no, let's do this order business. How about? Here's my end. I wonder what's up with this. Because this is the output of the algorithm. This is something else that was present in Woodroom, but I don't know if I want it to be present here. And I bet this is to do with how DRes does its thing. Well, let's comment it out. There, now I should be listening to only the output of the algorithm without this extra thing going on. Because it's a combination of simplifying the algorithm to only what it's meant to be, but then also adding some other stuff that wasn't present before. I think that bit that I just commented out is going to prove unnecessary. Okay, full brightness. We're not going to have this. Got plenty of them that have this. That's the full brightness regen. So it does seem to work. That suggests that I can not only comment that out, but I can also go in search of where it says IIR and ditch that. It's just a factor of DRes, and we're not doing the DRes at the moment. In fact, DRes is going to equal 1. And then we're not worrying about, well, and then we're going to lose some of this stuff that only applies if we're using the DRes, which we're not. Let's double check that that was correct. Okay, so all of that is only when we are doing the ugly form of DRes, which we're not doing. That bit's fine, because this is where we introduce overall scale. This is how it's able to run at very high sample rates without trouble. That's correct. That's correct. This won't need to exist here anymore. And this gets to be like this. And that should work. We'll find out. We'll find out whether that still works. However, this bit needs to be changed. We are only doing the high quality step version. The DRes exists in a bunch of existing reverbs. This one's not for DRes. This one's for something else. In this case, it's using the DRes technology to be able to do high sample rates. And that's what that's for. Also, I feel like fooling around with the regen. And I think what will work is me adjusting this. The scaling factor is going to become like 3. And that'll make the intermediate setting more of a delay. And then that stuff extends it to become nearly infinite reverb by this little math here. In theory, I could push some of that stuff up a hair and see if it gets me to runaway feedback or not. For right now, though, I'm going to pass on that. So let's test it again, see if it's still in working order. I feel like maybe it's warm enough in here to not throw another log on the fire. I've got other logs that I could throw on the fire. I'm just not sure if that's what I want to do right now. Also, this is from a little ways back, but if Mendeley, if he meant do I use into the matrix on reverbs, yes, it was used in all of these reverbs. It's a primary technology for being able to get this stuff up and working. Okay, so full sustain. That's probably an acceptable middle section. And you can cut it down to a very, very small amount if you want. Or have it be an enormously long delay. And that is now not connected either. No sound going in, no noises from position. Position only makes a noise if there's noise going into it. There's no reverb or regeneration on position either. It's just the input delay. It's the pre-delay. Okay. I think I can probably also assume that early RF is going to be fine. Then I go and find where that was applied. It's farther down here, I think. There we go. There it is. And hey, that means we get to do less math. What OS am I running? I'll show you. I do all of my basic coding on a retro laptop that is running Snow Leopard. Also, I can show you another thing too. More show and tell. I got this out of the basement. This is a super antique iMac. It was my mom's when she was alive. It has on it the same build system as is on the laptop. It's my backup. If the laptop dies, I'll still be able to do the retro developing. Yeah, so that's pleasing. Also, give me a moment. I'm going to do a thing. I don't need to do that much as far as warming the place up, but I can throw another log on. Call it a day. That'll be enough for today. One more log and we're good. And I can get back to the coding. Oh, this one's a good one. This is a light spongy log. Burn up real nice. Nothing left but ash by the time I'm done with that. There it goes. Alrighty. I mean, during winter, it's been great having the wood stove can. Wood stove can it's a nice little touch of humanity because it's something I have to deal with all the time. I'm in Vermont. It gets cold in the winter in Vermont. So I get to share it with people. So yeah, it's 1068. Minecraft in real life, except for that I am not burning coal or lava. Okay, so far so good. Now what I'm wondering is whether there's a good way for me to... I feel like I could be applying some filtering after this whole routine. And I'm not sure whether I want to filter inside the loop, although if I do any filtering inside the loop, it is going to make the deep reverb become darker. And that's not always a bad thing. Like I can show you what that means. I needed to go and remove some of this stuff anyway. See, we are no longer doing IRL and R. Oh, what's the average 6L and average 6R doing? Do we have this in here somewhere? Or are we not using it? I feel like I'm not using that, which means I can. That means I can use it. Let's go and find where our feedback happens. Here's one place where our feedback happens. That gets fed back into the input again. So if I use the average L to do this, hang on. Hang on, I'm figuring out how to do this. Technically, I can just do it like that. A little bit wasteful, but if I do it like this, we'll hold up a moment. It'll show me which of these things are being selected and which are not. Boop, boop, and boop. So then I need another one of these. And maybe this. Oh yeah, okay, so that was wrong, but it's fixable. We do need all those, but we only need that, and then that, and then that, and then times 0.5. That is now halfway. And then we just do the thing again immediately. I don't know whether it'll be easy for it to do, but this way we get a averaged one, and then we assign the average for next time around. And then I need to find the right version, because this is the left version. Oh, it's going to be a little different though. So what I'm looking at here, F6AL, and it's going to say F6 something else. It's going to say F6FR. That much is correct. That much is correct. But this has to say FR now. And then that goes away. Well, shucks, in theory that worked. Ah, but apparently not. Okay, so what happened? I would have sworn I had that in there somewhere. Oh, average 6L, that's why it wasn't working. That's easily fixed. I can fix that. If I can find it, I can fix it. There it is. And then also down here, we'll have the same problem. I just forgot to call it average 6. And let us double check, seeing as I just got confused there. Did I even initialize it? Yep, sure did. Okay. That time it builds. Now we see whether this makes a darker infinite reverb. We've taken just one feedback path and darkened it with a simple average, which doesn't technically even have to be that simple of an average. I can have it be a smaller amount quite easily. Here's what we got. That one's also going to not be a thing. I think that's going to work. That is only in the feedback path. So it will successfully cool off the highs as the sound continues to go. We're not doing it in every single feedback path. We're only doing it in one feedback path out of 6. And that makes it not darken up too fast. Because this is Rockstar. It's not supposed to darken up that fast. And since it's only in the feedback path, if we don't have a long regen, it doesn't really get that much darker. It'll get just darker enough to have a sense of distance. Rather than if you go crazy nuts bonkers. So one thing I can tell from that is I have a little flexibility as far as making it extend a little bit longer. So we'll hide this value over here and see what happens if we bump it up to 196 while leaving the rest of it alone. That has now made it be a little bit more. And let's see where that takes us. Because if I take that too far, it will start doing infinite reverb and get louder and louder until it is out of control. Let's see if it's doing that yet. No, it's getting quieter. So much so, in fact, that I can push it farther. Ooh, and this is the largest value of these two. I will end up settling on a single value for that, I think. But just not quite yet. Instead, I'm just notching that up bit by bit. Yeah, it's going to be a very long delay time when you do that with it. Let's see if we have it doing infinite sustain yet. Yeah, that's not an infinite sustain, but it's pretty good. Like in theory, I can converge on a setting where it will literally do infinite sustain at infinite regen. In theory, I could figure that out in practice. We have to multiply it by this, I can even use the Mac's own calculator. So 2 of these and 1 of those. So 03923125. I don't think we're using that anywhere else. I don't think we're using that anywhere else. Well, one way to find out. So this is currently now a hard-coded setting. Let's see if we have the infinite yet, or runaway. Runaway would be bad. We don't want that. Runaway. So we don't like that. I don't think it hurt the speakers because they don't have it at super crank volumes, but yep. That's no bueno. We don't like that one bit. And I know why too. I forgot to multiply it by 1/3. That's a very good reason why it would be feeding back. I left a whole math section out. There we go. So this is much more likely to behave. Now, it scared me too. I'm sitting there in the room. You didn't even have it pointing at the microphone. It was just background noise there. These are the risks you run hacking around with stuff like this. You forget to multiply a thing right, and next thing you know, it's going wee. Okay, at this stage, we should be, if not safe, more likely to be safe, because that was literally 3 times as loud as it should have been. Let's see. Drum roll, please. Do we have scary? Nope, that's behaving itself just fine. In fact, a little bit too fine. So that's the value. And if we bump up to 1.4, it's not as loud as ×3, but that's going to be closer to feedback. And I'm going to explore a little bit and get to where we have the refusing to die away, because there is going to be a setting, which is the perfect setting for this, where it will do literal infinite reverb without, if I dial the setting in just right, it will do that thing just right. See, and it's reg 6n that does it. So there is a magic number that gives it literally perfect feedback. And I don't know what it is. So we'll find out by experimenting. Least I can do is get closer anyway. And again, it went wee when it was 3 times this value. Here we go. That's runaway. That's runaway. So we don't want 1.4, we could try 1.3.5. Or maybe the value we want is actually more like 1.3.3.3.3.3. That might just be it. That might be, if 1.3 wasn't enough and 1.4 is too much, maybe this is the perfect setting. One way to find out. Oh, for heaven's sake, what have I done? That's just silly. Why are we doing that? I'm not drinking more coffee. I'm just going to have to make do with what I've got today, which may involve doing dumb things. So a little more silence this time. Do we still have Runaway? No. But that's probably an acceptable setting for this. We can pull it right back. That's more of a normal setting. But you can crank it out to ridiculous levels. So here we have the Hitchhiker's Guide disaster area. But then in normal settings, you don't have that degree of sustain. Alrighty. So now we've got the thing dialed in pretty much the way it needs to be. I've got the infinite sustain set up to have more sustain than it needs to be. And, hey, DK for real. Fatty Q does. That specifically does. Some other ones, like for instance, the parametric EQs in the original Console X have a degree of a kind of saturation. They're a little bit dirtier than just being perfectly clean. Okay, where are we at? Room tone. Also, something else. What's a recent plugin with this thing? I believe it is, okay, either Slew or maybe what I want is the one in TAPAC. That might be just the thing. That might be just the thing to include as a darkener filter on the output of everything. And I can get it from 2Tape. I can get it from the most recent 2Tape. Because I set these up to appear in specific places. So I can pull this out of 2Tape as just the filter section. And I'm going to do exactly that. See where it says pre-TAPAC? That's the part I want. Oh, got everything selected. I want to apply this filter section. And that might be what works best for my, because the thing about the Bezier filters is it will generate high frequency stuff that's not consistent with reality. But then if I apply this after the Bezier reconstruction, I'm thinking that'll probably work better. So let's do that. Rather than make stuff into classes and such, I just basically have things in sections in the actual code, demarcated in such a way that I can find where it is and plunk it in sort of as an individual drop. And that's just going to be initializing up here where it says pre-tape pack. That's what I'm looking for. Just like that. And this will scale up very nicely to extremely high sample rates, but you don't have to take it quite as far as all that. And see, are we using both spacing and sleuzing? Which one are we using? Let's scroll to the bottom here at the end of all of this stuff. After the reconstruction, I'm just going to go in there in this slot. It's going to be a sleuzing, apparently. Okay. Fair. Then we're instantiating a dark sample and editing it. Here's our code that lives in the audio thread for doing that. So that goes there. Ooh, hang on, slow up. Well, I can do that in place, I think. This is the part I'm not using. I'm not using this part, but I'm going to do one layer of this rather than the two layers that are here. And are we updating average slew? Is that showing up in here? It is. Okay. All right. That's probably it. That's probably enough. Because we are updating input sample L and R. Just happening in a slightly weird way. And spacing lives somewhere else. I think spacing lives in the AD clip. What that means is that part's going to run fine, but I have to dig out spacing up here. This is the only part that's actually getting used, and it's being used like this. So what I can do is, actually that'll be fine. Copy that, go up to where we're instantiating things up here, like this there. Don't need that anymore. Don't need that anymore. Haven't added GrumTune yet, but I'm going to. I'll be setting the final level of that on my own, I think. Really focus and figure out where it needs to go. Okay. Goodbye to that. See whether this builds. It should. And then now let's see whether this is pleasing or significantly different in any way. More regen. Okay, I could believe this. So maximum sustain. And the question is it doing stuff that I like to the hi-hats and things? I'm going to say I like that. Let's stack up a bunch of snares. Let's stretch it out a little bit. Not much, not that much. Okay. Snare drum being pulled away from the distant wall. Oh wait, let's bring dry in. Maximum. Fair enough. I feel like that's a thing that can kind of sort of work. Oh, didn't mean to do that one. Back wall. Front. default. Position. Cool beans, cool beans. It's a start. So the other thing I was really hot to try out was the room tone part. That's going to apply when I have silence. And I should be able to make it so that I can hear what it will sound like. I'm going to use a couple of different parameters for this. Hang on. So that's going to do something. And then that's going to be the loudness of it. We can take this as red. That'll be fine. That'll be fine too. And then I can feed one of these feedback paths with what I'm doing. Don't mind me, just thinking of stuff. So where do I get that from? Do I get that from to tape? Are we doing that into tape? How many matches have we got? Ah. Bam, got there. I need something like this. So let's see. Not going to be calling it that. That's fine. Wild that it runs this way, but whatever. I think we can lose that. These are the things that are not being used. It's only there because it was there in verb 6's, the example code, which is still there for you to use if you'd like to play with these. But here's what we're going to do. One noise source, we happen to pick FPDL. So FPDL divided by uint max gives us a output level. Room noise is most definitely not going to be 0.24. It's going to be acting a little more like this. And room tone is going to be a thing. So there are a variety of problems with this. One of them is that I might just end up making it a we're doing a 0 to 1, I believe. So if I do this, then it's a negative 0.5 to positive 0.5. And then if I scale it, I can scale it by going times room tone. And now I have a mono from the left FPD. Now I have a mono room noise. Except for it's not that I'm going to want that. I'm going to want to do something with it. But I feel like the first thing that I can do is at least make sure I've got this and that it's doing what I think it's doing. And I can move it from there too, because we're instantiating it there, but we're not using it anywhere near there, so maybe not. Maybe not do that. Maybe put it in here. And then that's scaling it from 0 to whatever level it is. And I can maybe sneak it into the feedback section like this. But we're not going to be keeping it as that. But I want to see if it even does anything. If my amplitudes are about right or whatever. It should be possible to make that be a fairly faint white noisy sound. White noise is not what I'm going to want, but it's going to be like a faint white noisy sound. See if it worked. Yep, this one's not for that. If you want a big space like this, I would have that be alien spaceship. With that, you can switch the filter on and off. Okay. Let's make some blank space in here. Let's fire it off. Let's see if we can bring in some noise. This is the noise level. This is going to be another factor that I'm going to bring in soon. That is not enough noise to notice, is it? Well, there's nothing I can do about this. We can see if we can get it to make noise by cranking these things up, including regen, as far as possible. And I see the RMS value sneaking up, but not by very much. That's fine, though, because there's something else going on here which I would like to attend to. So back over to the H file. I do not have a room noise factor here, but if I put it there and then blanket here, then we can make this do its random walk. And we will be using that variable. We'll be using that variable. Ooh, but I'm going to need to do another thing. Need to do that. You might or might not recognize what I'm about to do here. Let's go find where it was doing the thing. There it is. Now, we see whether it wanders off or whether I've got it centered. Then, after doing that, because one of the things that's going to do is produce giant low-frequency rumble, which is going to go out of control, we include this. Actually, wait a moment. Wait a moment. Wait a moment. Yep. Forgetting all kinds of things today. That's what I had, yeah? Yep, that's what I had. Now it's going to be a used variable. So we add this. Actually, I don't need these. It's one statement. I'm comfortable with using only one statement sometimes. That's going to be the same regardless, because FPDL is going to be the same either way. But Here we get to do something extra. This is polarity. And that's weird, but no problem. I know why it did it. And now, since we're only doing that once every now and then, we'll do this, or this. But now it's more like that. So you see, if I do that, then we are only adding the positive value of it. So if it's larger than 0, it changes to this. This is the code in Voice of the Starship. And then if we do not, then we will always just add it and it can wander all at once. Now, what I still don't know is whether the amplitude of this is anywhere near big enough to be audible. But this is now wandering. This is now a drunkard's walk. This is now a Brownian noise. And periodically, as we go past room count, we reset room timer, and then the randomness that we add is always, 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 always going to be towards 0. And that's enough to stop it from wandering away forever. Honor Texa? No, I don't do things like that. But I can make a filter for you. Maybe you'll think it sounds like a Korg bass. Meanwhile, let me continue to play with this. Let's see whether this made a room tone or not. Here's silence. But now we're not simply adding a random noise, we're adding a wandering random noise. And the meter over here to the side will show us what it does. And dres is actually the count. Well, already it's doing something. Trouble is, it is too subsonic to be heard. Even my woofers aren't picking it up. That's room tone right there. That's being fed into the reverb. But you're not hearing it because it is simply too low frequency. But it's coming up to like 40 dB. So let's dial this back. What should happen when I do this is it is going to, the RMS level is going to become smaller again. And yes, it is. So it's wandering back down too small again. So we can cut the room tone down to silence, and then deres causes it to shrink right down again. That is what I'm doing, yes. So I'm not going to be able to dial this in on stream. We might play with some other things, but that's what I'm shooting for. 2026 reverbs, post K Woodroom reverbs, including this one, including the barn. Barn is going to be very relevant for this. K Monastery is going to be very relevant for this. Mansion, which is meant to be kind of like Headley Grange, is going to be very much like this. These will produce a apparent noise. Let's see, times room tone. So now we need to make room tone become much louder. So let's just make that be equally extreme. And then we should be able to make a roaring, distant noise as if we were turning the amplitude on the microphones up as far as they will go, because I want to hear what this sounds like. I got to dial in an appropriate sound for it. And I have no problem with having that come off as quite loud. It's just going to have to be correctly set once I'm done with it. Silent area. Reverb set to 0. Audible sound. So there's room tone. But it's going to need to go lower than that, so there's room tone. Here, I'll make it. So in the dim, far distance of this, around where you'd be hearing dither and stuff, room tone. And I can voice it a little higher, I can voice it a little lower. I could maybe have it wander a bit. That's a much more high pitch. As I lower it, we're going to get more super deep stuff going on. And the amplitude will become that much louder. So what we've got here, and I'll turn it back up so you can hear it properly. There's a certain sort of windy quality going on because the lows have gone down a little too far. Although just for fun, one thing I can do is go even farther and see what that acts like. Because one of the possibilities is to pick particular types of reverb. Like, say, K Mansion is supposed to be Headley Grange. Headley Grange is the Led Zeppelin 4 and many other albums as well. House that album was recorded in, and it is supposed to be very, very haunted. If we have a noise floor for the room tone that has a bunch of extreme lows in it, it'll seem more haunted. Like what we've got now, there's a certain rumbliness to this. Feels a little stormy. But if I push it further, we should have it activating the, should make it bump up those meters quite a lot. And again, ultimate regen. Without as much regen, it's not as loud. So I'm going to turn the regen all the way up again so we can properly hear it. It in fact is doing low as mono. I can't show it on the snare because the snare is too loud. You don't actually hear the sound. This is just the background. This is just room tone. It's going to be much quieter. Ah. Yes, you do. You deserve somebody looking after you. That's why I do this. So do you hear the noise it's making? That's too much lows. It's kind of going whomp, 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 whomp. Although one kind of nice thing about it is that even though it's doing that weirdness, it's like going rumph, rumph, rumph. It's kind of like noise being, air being blown around the space. It just needs to not be nearly as deep as this. And if we don't have as much regen, it starts resembling just straight up noise again. This is a good way of dialing in where it needs to be set. Because again, if I make it much smaller, it starts to be like a continuous wind. And we can make it be smaller and smaller, and it'll start acting more like just white noise. But the more of it I let in, and there's still a tendency, there's still a little bit of a hint of roominess about this. But then when I let it start wandering, that's when interesting things start happening. But if I take it too far, it becomes a rumbly, whumpy noise. Okay. So I'll be dialing it in on full regen and making it so that it is not it needs to be realistic to normal recording sounds. But consider this to be like your dither noise floor kind of thing, or my plugins already do a noise floor for denormalization. So it's going to be the noise floor, it's going to be the room tone of the dither. It's going to be, or the room tone of the reverb, basically. So rather than being just a high, well, in some cases I might end up having it be as high as this. If it's a very still, that's the thing, is like very still conditions that still sound like room tone. Rounder sounds that sound more like a room. This to me sounds like a room. But then rumbly noises. You can hear it going. You can hear it going on. And it's fine. But this amount of low end getting in there is like there's a hurricane blowing through the space. And just everything is far too rumbly. Oh yeah, well, I'm hearing it as well as I need to. Yeah, I can pick out settings for this. Like this would be a count of 17. And it'll gradually quiet down. But rather than the background being digital silence, the background of the reverb, for a super huge reverb, becomes room tone like this. And then with less reverb, you don't get nearly as much of it. So if you're dialing that back, the amplitude of the room tone also dials back. And then again, a new version of Cans is not unthinkable. I just don't have it going right at the moment. I'll tell you straight up, I don't have that going right at the moment. Position does not change the room tone, because position is the thing in the room. It doesn't change the room tone at all. Here, let's select just a little piece of noise. So the way it interacts with the quietest sounds this is also a little bit like that plugin that I did way back when people were talking about adding just straight up noise that was amplitude modulated according to the sound. That was the thing that somebody was doing, and I was like, oh, let me make a plugin about that, and I did. I can't remember what it was called now. It wasn't Silhouette, it was a different one. But this is absence of any room tone. And pretend this was just the faintest of... Actually, let me doctor it a little bit. More time for it to die away. So imagine this is the faintest of faintest noises off in the back of the reverb on a super infinite reverb. If we add lots of room tone that's very deep to it, then the sounds sort of fade into a random shakiness. But if our room tone is less deep, we get a different quality out of that. Like, this is be down at the very quietest threshold of sound. then that comes in. And you find the right setting, and it affects the way it fades into the background. And then the room tone drops back. Correct, Jonathan. So I don't know whether Paul wants to make an AAX. He'd be the one to do that if that was the case. And then imagine that this was at the threshold of hearing. Fades into room tone like this, and then if you don't have as much regen, and then it's a matter of how much rumble you want in there. What's the texture of room tone supposed to be? So just in theory here, this is Rockstar, so this is a big space. So it should be a little bigger than this, but not rumbly shaky. Like, here's rumbly shaky. Don't want that. Honestly, if I set it just right, it's like I can hear other notes and tones happening. Like there's stuff echoing and reverberating miles away. And that's pretty cool. So we'll see. And of course, it's all subject to how much regen is there. If you don't have any regen, you also don't have any room tone. And the point is to have it be a very quiet thing that I'll be setting it up by listening to actual music with periods of silence, or maybe the snare, for instance. Here's the snare. Max room tone. Okay, so I feel like 18 is a little much. And this is going to scale with D-Res too. So if I get it right once, it's fine. I don't need to do overall scale on it. Spooky. And then we simply turn it way the heck down so that the sound it's producing isn't as obtrusive. And now we see how far down it goes. Bearing in mind, of course, if we crank it up, we will start getting it picking up again. And there it goes. So, $40 dB down. So the question becomes, how much background noise is in one of these spaces? Because it's meant to have a completely subliminal effect. We don't want it to be all cranked out or anything. But it's effectively the same thing as having a quiet wind blowing in the mix, coming in through the reverb. Like there is wind blowing past the windows of the building in which we are in. What's that going to be? Well, if it's at 0.01, we're a solid 54 dB down, and that's at maximum resonance. I do wonder whether there is any benefit to having it wander at all, but I'm not sure there necessarily is. I feel like having it be consistent probably more important. So 0.15 and 0.01. And again, here's our room tone. With a bit of luck. And I particularly like how notes seem to come out of it, but then that stands to reason. It should seem like that. It's a reverb tank. In fact, for the reverbs that favor a particular tonality, it's going to exaggerate that tonality when at a gain level like this. Makes me wonder whether I can play with this just a little bit more. So it'll remember where it was at. I believe I did either 1.4 or 1.34. Let's try 1.35. As I increase regen here, we're going to get a cooler room tone. Proper rockstar room tone. And we'll see how well that works. Because in theory, this can be set to essentially go into feedback on whatever parts of the tone. Let's see what happens. I may have taken it too far. I know I didn't take it way too far, but I may have taken it too far. Here's our room tone. Are we getting feedback? No. Or are we? I see those meters are not going down. We are looking at a regen that is not letting go of what is almost certainly DC. See, it's not doing anything yet. But if I feed something in there, it starts recirculating and never stops. And as you can see, those meters aren't going down. I keep forgetting when I move this around, it doesn't make it become a larger pointer. So that needs to be fixed. It's gone a little too far. It's just sitting on a DC offset. That's no bueno. So rather than 135, we'll see what it does with 134. 13333 is what I left off at. That was behaving okay. So we'll step back just a hair and we'll see whether it gets DC building up inside itself. Because we can feed that in using the room tone very easily. And in some ways that's actually useful behavior. Oh, hang on. I should select a silence first. Boom. Okay. Total feedback, but our RMS is still 130 dB down. Here's our room tone. Does it fall away? Yes, thank goodness. So this is still not of the most exceptional, but then at the same time, I hope it keeps dropping. Hello. I'm not feeding any more noise, and why is it getting stuck? 21.9. I can make it fall off just fine by doing this. Actually, it should be falling off even more effectively now. I don't know why it's taken so long. Yeah, there we go, 162. And will you look at that? We're not putting any room tone in, and it's still building up something, like DC offset. Well, what does it sound like when it's making room tone? I know this is pushing DC into my subs. I want to listen for interesting tones in the room tone. And maybe find a useful setting which will bring out more of those tones. Because I know the rumble is not helping anybody. So, from 15 to 14. I kind of hear musical notes in there. we're definitely going to be dialing back regen just a hair because its ability to sit on this is a DC offset. It's not blowing my speakers necessarily, but that's bad. Don't want that. For one thing, if you hit stop, it'll go pop. Not loudly, but it did. Also, our RMS is creeping up, even though I'm not feeding any energy in. And even the smallest amount makes it go racing up. So what I'm listening for here, and I wonder whether maybe I can put like a little servo thing in there or something that will address this more directly. That's actually worth the shot. Let's see if I can do something about that. I'm already cutting the extreme lows, and I'm able to feed in extreme lows using room tone very effectively. And I got about an hour and a half before dinner. And how would I go about generating because I know I'm not going to want, so let me see. Firstly, let's quit out of here. Let's introduce the DC offset compensator kind of like here. It's not going to use a room noise or room timer. We'll call it DC Chase, and we'll try to set it up so that it can kind of expand as it goes. Maybe I can even use another one of these controls for it. Let's see. What can we do with that then? B, C, and then D is free. Yeah, D's free. Just going to straight up copy it. There. So D is now going to be DC amount. Oh no, I lost the stream. It came back. Okay. All right, we froze, we came back, whatever. I go away, I return. So, DC Chase. Oops. Here's one of my feedbacks. Times we'll add both of the feedbacks while we're at it, the ones that are getting something done to them. That's F6 LR. That's scaled by the amount. And then we'll scale it like this. So that's where we add the room noise, but this is also where we actually, hang on, I got to do this differently. That's just going to make feedback run away. We need to do it the opposite way. And we can do that like this. There we go. There, so it will keep trying to subtract that as it goes. Let's see what we got. Something should have happened. We're trying things and something might happen. Silence. Reverb. Here's our subtractee. There's our feedback. But if we include a little bit of this, whoop, actually that went the opposite way. Why did it do that? That seems weird. Can I make it settle down again? Okay, so that did the opposite of what it was supposed to. That's supposed to make it turn down, and it did not. Let's see if I add it instead, does anything useful happen? Because that should be helping. And if it didn't, I've got the polarity wrong, or something else is happening. Feedback should be doing what I think it's doing. So what's supposed to be happening is if I turn up this other thing, it should be chasing DC and taking it away as it goes. It was not doing that. It was doing the opposite, and I'd like to know why. In particular, I want to find out whether it does literally the same thing now. Here's our noise. Here it kind of hangs on and persists. Let's see if it blows up again. No, that was definitely it blowing up. Yep. So we were actually better off the first time. Far out. Well, that's weird. Rather than using the feedback, I could simply just have it chase the noise. Stranger things have happened. It's worth a try. There's the noise. And since it was worse this way, we will subtract it this time. And let's see what we got. Now we've got DC chase chasing the lows of the noise and ignoring the overall feedback. Overall feedback should be fine. This is essentially a really slow IIR filter. And we're going to see what it does. And DC chase doesn't actually alter room noise. Room noise continues to chase in its normal way, but DC chase is chasing room noise instead. What do we get? First, let's make sure that's at 0. Here's our noise. Full feedback again. Okay, that didn't work. What if we do it here? No, that's just producing DC rumblies again. We just got DC rumblies again. What if I just use it as a high pass on one of the feedback factors? In theory, that might work. See, I've got room tone all the way off, but I've still got some lows tucked in there. So one thing I already know I can do is take regen to 135 again. That gave me a lot of sustain. So if I took one of these feedback parameters and used this as a high pass, let's see. Because I should be able to get, like if it's building up DC, I should be able to apply a high pass to just one of these parameters and it will rein itself in here. Let's try it on this one. I could use it on an entirely third one. So DC chase plus equals BL times DC amount. And then we modify F6BL in place. Those two things should make it so that it is chasing the value of F6BL and responding strongly to DC power going in there. But then it will also be taking that DC power out. Let's see. Or I could do it in an entirely different one. But for now, let's try it on just that one. What am I doing? I'm losing my mind. Build. Oh, didn't like that, did it? What's gone wrong? Oh, I didn't spell it right. Yeah, and that proves I didn't even build that last time, so I'm really losing mine. Crap. Bada-boom. Now that control should be able to pull low frequencies out of the feedback loop. And I've also increased the feedback amount to where it should build up and stay. Let's see what we got. So no room tone. This is DC chase now. And regen at 1. Now it will build up, and it will hang on to DC, but can I make it go away by using this? Use very small amounts of it at first. No, that formed a wave. That didn't work properly at all. But what would happen if I only used a very tiny amount? Would it still form a wave? Here's our feedback. Now, tiniest amount. Is that pulling energy out, or is it just oscillating? I feel like that might just be oscillating. You can test it by pulling that right back. Yeah, energy sneaking back in. Seems to be very eager. Ooh, now what? That's weird. What's your little problem now? We should be adding a literal 0 here. We've got room tone at 0, so what the hell? That looks very weird. It's acting strange. Okay, room tone but no regen means nothing happens. It's taken its own damn... Oh, nope, now it's gone down to silence again. Ooh, and I see a off-topic question. Good enough time to talk about that. I did not take any looks at the Nature Audio AL1, nor did I really analyze the buzzcut clipper. That's not what I was doing. What I was doing was responding to this guy's claims that he was able to dither aliasing. And since it was adding noise to the area beyond actual clipping, I had a different approach of doing that and saw what I could make of it. It didn't count as analyzing the buzzcut clipper, nor am I actually doing the things that the buzzcut clipper does. I'm doing something different with the same basic concepts. Because as far as I can tell, he's not doing what 80 clip, yes, 80 clip, but he's not doing what clip only 2 does either. Although he could, it's MIT licensed, so if he wants, he can figure it out. So let's see. Add regen, and all of a sudden we're getting DC feedback. Remove regen, it'll eventually go away. But man, that measurement takes a long time to go. I'm not even sure what it's doing. So early RF included here. Well, we can get sounds going down to be quiet again. But that's just building up energy. Yeah. I think that we are on to a not success there. So what's going to happen is simply this. This goes away because it never helped. This goes away because it didn't help. That part's fine. That goes away because it didn't help. That goes away. And defining the variable also goes away. And then this goes to 134, or possibly 134.5. Let's see whether we can get it to behave itself better. Maybe there is a setting in there. Oh. That needs to move. That needs to go here. And here we have the blank sound. And here we go. No crazy unpleasant effect. Full res. Ooh, hello. Okay, would you look at that? I have 100% regeneration. Room tone is at 0, but my RMS is sneaking up even though there is no sound being added. I think that means it's gone too far. Okay, maybe these up at the top are what I should be looking for, and that is a sort of a global average, the total runtime. It's doing some kind of estimation down here, and I keep watching it and being like, you need to become silent. The ones at the top, I think, are the actual RMS, and the one at the bottom is like some other type of record. Yeah. So the fact that this number here is not going down fast enough is probably harmless. Probably. That said, with silence going in, it really shouldn't be sneaking up like this. That part is not great. Although one thing about it, since it's not going into full saturation, I can use it to dial in the resonant frequencies of the reverb a little more. Okay, interesting. I hear different notes coming out. That's far too high for the size of this hull. Although I like the notes I'm hearing. That's far too deep. And the default setting is going to be hanging around more like here. At which point the noise will die away very quickly if no new energy is added. So my maximum regeneration is a little higher than it should be. But I'm fairly fond of this 13 here. Let's compare it to 12 and 14. mean, the thing about it is if there's any reverb to be had at all, then we do get tone colors out of this. It doesn't have to be an infinite reverb. The reason I'm playing with infinite reverb is that that should make the space, the room tone, sing more obviously. The more I back it off, the more well-behaved it will be and the less it will build up things like DC offset, which I'm trying to avoid. Hey, J. Frank, I guess you're a fan of 2-tape 9, huh? Fair. I'm assuming this is going to give me integers, like 0.01 is going to be a delay time of 1, and 1.0, that's a delay time of 100, and so it becomes DC immediately. And 0 means we are constantly forcing all of the noise into just white noise. So that the choice of this is going to vary for each reverb. Each one is going to have a different integer count for how often it reins in the low frequency wander. And it will interact with the tone of the reverb to produce the sound that it'll have. And this is the sound of your noise floor of the space you're in. So yeah, maybe not 9. 10. Nah. 11. See, I can hear little notes in there. Thing is, this is a rock star room, and the amount of regeneration it can do is appallingly huge. So we need a little deeper. We need to go deeper. 12. Do not think there is any point to releasing the bias algorithm separately. Mind you, I've been known to do things like that, but the new tape does not use a new bias algorithm for 2-tape. I think the deal there is I don't think I released it separately in the first place, so maybe you want that separate. Assuming it works separately, I'm not sure it does. 12. Okay. 13. Okay, I'm hearing some lows in there. Potentially this is the correct scale. Let's see, about 14. Nah, I figured that out. Don't worry about it. I feel like 14 might be too deep. But we're going to be dialing back the regeneration a little bit, so let's see what it does. Not quite as extreme. And let's pull it back to 13 again. Let's pull it back to 12. I think it went a little flatter there. I'm not sure I like that. And it's definitely a lot flatter there. I think 13 is the only possible setting there. So it's 4:03. I'm going to leave this rumbling away and go and get my tacos ready. As in, turn on the oven and get pieces of cheese out to thaw. Setting it to full regen. I can make you hear the lows a little more than that. Check this out. Room mic. Oop. We're going to set it up that way, but I'm going to dial in the amount later. And we're going to dial back regen a little bit so that it can't go quite as hard as all that. Yeah. Oh, hey, JFerric. Vegan? Right on. So as long as we're playing with it and have settled on this 13 for the D-Res, let's play with some actual sounds in here. And then it's going to be a matter of finding an appropriate setting for a room tone that is way quieter than this, because it's meant to be almost like a dither-like. The idea from doing this is that it's almost like a dither background noise for the base of the track, but it's based on reverb. You know what I should do? I should let this continue to go, but we'll continue to play with the divider setting and see whether any of those work out better now that I've got audio going in, rather than just trying to evaluate it based only on silence and raw room tone. We need to figure out what form of the room tone fits with the way these notes die away best. So if we went for 14, you know, that's actually not bad. Maybe that's better. I wonder whether that's better. Let's do the opposite. Seems okay. If we had a very different setting, much more high frequency. So the idea of the more high frequency one, to my mind, is to do stuff that is more like rooms that aren't as big and rumbly, like something that would be a lot smaller. You'd be sort of zeroing in on the type of room environment that this suggests. You start bringing in more of the lows, and my idea is that I can use the intensity of reverb there, or maybe even pull it back a hair. And try to match the tone of the wind noise with the tone of how the room sounds. And the noise sounds too high MIDI here, but we can keep going. We can try 11. And I kept settling on 13 for this one. That's the thing that I kept settling on. Let's see if there's anything special about it. Yeah. That feels like that is the size of the big old hall. But with this amount of room tone, it's like there's a big powerful wind blowing through it. But it kind of contributes to making it seem as big as it is. And then of course, dial room tone right back. And you've got a more natural tone going on. But as it fades away, rather than fading away into digital noise or into silence, it will appear to fade away into being in a live acoustic space. And that is the idea. And then the noise is about 40 dB down. So if you cranked it way the heck up, you'd feel an atmosphere around it. One like this. So it's weirding me out that it's not able to go to 0. You can go to 0 for Jen is all the way off. That's just 27 dB down. So we've settled on the divisor, the room tone corrector being 13 is the number. We have room tone set to 0. We have regen at 0.5. That should be enough that the sound can die away once it's done. We're going to apply and close and see what we're looking at. And then we're going to normalize the crap out of it. What do we got? Okay, fair. And now we're going to make all of this be silent. Let's go even harder. Boop. Everything can be silent. Silence. Silencio. Then we're going to apply it again. Still with room tone at 0. This is supposed to be able to die away to silence. Does it successfully do that, or does it not? I see audio there. Normalize. Well, that's amusing. What's that about? Okay, well, let's undo that normalize then and go back over to here and see whether we can normalize in a way that actually brings up the noise floor. Please, to normalize now. Okay, very good, very good. So here is the background. Sounds a little bit like a clang. For when there is no room tone, it does appear to dial away to literal silence. Now we try it with a little bit of room tone and see what we get. And by a little bit, what I mean is I'm going to get that going and then pull it right back. Noise floor of about 50 dB down, that is. Yeah, that's 50 dB down. Now we apply that. And then normalize from here. Alrighty. And now we see what that noise floor looks like. And that's the room tone. And then we normalize from here. There's the room tone. Does look to be a little bit wandery, but not in too horrible of a way, I think. Yeah, that's your noise floor, that's your room tone. Cool, cool, cool. Boop. Okay, so this goes back to 134 or even less. I don't know though, like that was kind of behaving okay, so I probably don't need to pull it back even less than that. 134 is probably going to be okay. Or we can split the difference, 13425. There we go. And we'll check to see whether 13 does what we think it does. And just for funsies, we'll use that directly and see what we get out of that, because we can scale that too. And then this will be turned to 13 if it turns out that this works. Build. Getting very close to having it be done, at least the AU version of it, anyhow. Just the audio unit, although making VSTs from an audio unit is not that hard. Not when it's a stereo. We know what the stereo is. Alrighty. Same challenge. So K Rockstar, this time room tone, this time DRes means nothing because it's automatically 13. Param C, room tone, that's literally multiplied by 1. If we play it, it's a solid 60 dB down, as in 60 dB. If we do it with full regeneration, we can wait, see if it gets any quieter. The mono version of the 2Tape 9 plugin is, oh look, the sound has faded away to about 50 dB down, or 40 or so. Cool, okay. That seems good. Mono version in Audio Unit is a N2N plugin. It will run on a mono track. It'll also run on a quad, or a 5.1 or a 7.1 track. So the mono version is also the version that you can use on multi-channel. And that's what that's for. It should not be louder and cooler. It should be about the same. It's not supposed to be any different. If it's very different, then oops, that's a mistake. Maybe you're just thinking it's louder and cooler. That said, there are things in the stereo that are not answered in the mono, like the flutter isn't going to be quite the same. But yeah, the mono version is simply the same thing, but in a mono version that the audio units can instantiate over and over again and scale up to larger numbers of things. So let's have a little fun. Silencio. Now let's see what the reverb tail acts like when regen is cranked all the way up with my small amount of difference. Room tone is 1, DRes is 13. Apply and close, and let's see what we got. Boop. And then let's normalize that. And there's what the room tone sounds like at full crank. I think that'll work. Might even be a little louder room tone than it needs to be. Although bear in mind, we don't usually use reverb at full blast. That might very well be fine. After all, here's the initial hit. And let's see if we undo that so that we can play with it again. And instead we use our default setting. This is what it'll ship like. I could play with cutting the, if I do room tone of 0.5, it'll be 6 dB down. That might be about right. Let's try that. Let's see if it gives me something that is not appropriate. Here's our sound. And here's our application of the sound. And here we normalize. Yeah. I'm going to say that's acceptable. And if you don't normalize it, it's that much quieter. Ooh, no, let's normalize everything, including the hit. See what that gives us. Maybe I should tone it down even more. Okay, so that looks legit. Maximum volume snare hit, and then we'll be hearing this sort of room tone afterwards. I think that works. I can't really hear it, but you're not supposed to have it be like, room, all of a sudden I really hear it. Like, this would be the kind of situation where if you did a compression, like for instance, I can do pressure. Here's pressure 6. So if we compressed as hard as possible with pressure 6, then this is what it does. And then if we normalize that, this is what it does. We've got an attack. And then our background is still kind of just there. And it still basically sounds like room tone. But it's definitely on the quiet side from this. In theory, if you were on headphones, there would be that just faint atmosphere in there, barely perceptible. It's 50 dB down. And that's assuming that the reverb output is cranked all the way up too. So there's that. So I wonder what I've got that could actually bring that up. QRS. Surge or surge tide, perhaps? What do we got? Well, that's a very clean, compressy thing, but it's too uncontrollable. Let's fire up old dynamics again. I've been meaning to mess with dynamics again. Dynamics 3, most recent. Let's not do a gate. Okay, attack was too strong. Doing dynamic inversion. What the heck? Total dynamic inversion from Dynamics 3 gives us this. And then if we normalize that, we've brought the noise floor up a lot. And there's that noise floor, which still sounds like room sound. Oh dear God, what did I hear in there? It's a faint tinkly noise. There's like a virtual dog going by outside on the street. That's crazy. Didn't expect that. Alrighty. Boom. I ended up with an appropriate noise floor for that. And time to fuss with some of these things. Firstly, that seems legit. There's our amplitude. It's times 0.5. That sounds about right. There's our counter, which counts to exactly 13 each time because that proved to be the right size. Larger means there will be more bassy rumble than subsonics. Smaller means there will be less bassy rumble and it will sound more like a smaller space. A need for the K Rockstar arena to sound like a ginormous huge space, and so it ended up wanting 13. Well, bear in mind, this is one of the flatter reverbs I've ever done. The plot of it was almost perfectly flat, so that helps it interact with this. There might be other ones where they would end up calling for a larger room timer number simply because it would be throwing like low frequency whumps at the reverb algorithm, which would then transform them into something else, and you'd wind up with a much more interesting room tone. This is a perfectly fine, interesting room tone, but it's so flat that it's relatively colorless, and so it's not making weird resonances or anything. There's probably stuff that I'm going to be trying going forwards, operating on the same principles, where the room tone is much more interesting, because the reverb is not quite as smooth in its frequency response. Because the frequency response is going to characterize what this room tone is. It's getting a little bit of sort of pink noise or even brown noise in there. Brown noise if it's a larger number, pink noise or white noise if room timer goes to a smaller number. And that will feed into the regeneration of the reverb, which then dictates the kind of room tone that you get. And depending upon whether it's a more colorful sort of room, that could get real interesting. And it will definitely sound like the room that you're in. And I feel that that can only help. So yeah, we got something going on here. And if you remember, we've also got something going on here in that we have the tape-hack style high frequency compression rather than traditional filtering, and I feel that did a really good job. I'm down with this going forward for what I'm doing next. There may be little adjustments to it. I'm not sure I need them. It seems to be doing a pretty good job of handling things. And lovely, lovely, lovely. So how many controls do we have left? Regen. Position and dry wet. That's it. Let's put it together, and then I've been up since 3 a.m. working. was one of those days when the stress just kind of got to me. Some stuff that if I need to talk more openly about, then I will. But it means I have been up for forever. So I would like to not, let's see, position. So there we get A, B, and C. And the rest of it has been sorted out. So let's see, position. We started that at 0.75. And dry wet starts at 0.5, which seems legit. You can always turn it to full on. And yeah, everything should be adjusted to work with this now. So a few more changes, and it'll be available for me to fool with on my own time. Test it out, see how it works, see how well it does. A funny thing about it is, though, if you have these and have a separate one in every little thing, it might build up. I advise using this more in isolated, like as an AUX or whatever, but Yeah, I'm thinking I do indeed still work out a bit. I do my level best literally every weekday. I do my level best to play drums in a practice pad for the extent that my metronome winds up and tick-tocks back and forth. Then I play electric bass also on the same metronome for as long as it will tick-tock back and forth. That will be between 10 and 15 minutes depending upon what tempo it is. And then in the evening, I try to get upstairs by like 6:30 or maybe 7:30 at the latest, and I do exercises then as well. So these are all things that help. I mean, the thing that's catching up with me is I have to get my taxes finished. The taxes are with my tax preparer, who are taking their own sweet time about dealing with it, and I have slightly more than 7 days to return the end result to Vermont State Housing Authority for the recertification, because I'm a Section 8, believe it or not. And although I believe I would survive if all of that fell through, it takes me closer than I would like to see. So I haven't been talking about it because I might just be getting fearful for no good reason. Everything might still work out and be fine. But I might be looking at tacking like another $400 or $500, perhaps more, onto my monthly bills. And that would suck, seeing as I have the car payment and everything. But I haven't been talking about it because I don't know whether it's really going to be a problem. Oh, that's just also, yeah, I'll show you the metronome. Also, if you hold it crooked, it talks wrong. And we don't want that. If it sits perfectly flat, it talks normally like anybody. And all those color things drawn on them, that's all my tempo theory about some tempos being relaxed and some tempos being more tense. And the ones in red are more tense. The ones in blue are relaxed. And green and yellow are different other variations, like grooving or swaggering. And yeah, so I do exercise 5 times a week. If I can, I'll go upstairs. I will put on, sometimes it's a Loading Ready Run that I've burned 2 CDs. Sometimes it's Hell's Kitchen. Sometimes it's Mythbusters. I've been doing a fair bit of Mythbusters lately. And yeah. Oh, that's soft clock. That metronome, that's a hard clock. it goes click, click, click very abruptly. But the soft clock, the new version of soft clock that is also coming out, and I'm also waiting on that because maybe I can do some more things with it. The new version of soft clock incorporates the tempo thing that I was talking about. Shucks, I could simply show you. Let me just show you, but I'm going to do this first. And then once I've done this and I've shown you, I'm going to go and have my tacos because I've earned them today. But yeah, all of that should be good. We got A through C. Doesn't change anything down here. Hit save and that will be fine. But it changes everything up here. So we're only doing A through C. This is a 2026 reverb. So rather than being a variety of electronic things to do with it, it is a acoustic real space, complete with room noise that you may never hear, but I'm sure it's subliminal. And there's A through C there. And then we don't need to do it down here. So and there's room noise and room timer. That's correct. And if I build it, it should rebuild it. They will come. I'll build it and it'll build. And then if I am correct in that it is finished, we can put it there. One thing that might be fun is trying some of the other ones that might have more colorations or have very different room tones, just to see what I get, just to see what that's like. But for now, that might be done, short of doing the VSTs for it. And we'll throw the typical drums on it. And there we are with our settings. We can go to default. Default's like this. And here's the Rockstar Hall. It can be a slightly smaller kind of room. Yep. All right, good night. I'll be heading to bed soon enough myself. And then we have the infinite sustain for when you need to have infinite sustain in your rock. And there's your sustain going back to normal. Let's do that again. And it dies away to room tone. And I was telling you about the thing that I could show you. I'll show you how the soft clock works. The new one. Soft clock 3. So it's doing an 11 apparently. Tuple is 8. Triplet is either 0 or 1. And flavor is how much of the behavior it has going on. But as you change tempo, we start getting into different feels. See, 118 is a little more strident. And 122, that is a tempo that is among the most aggressive. Like 140. You know 140 as like a drum and bass tempo, well, but you might not have known that in my system it counts as among the most aggressive tempos. So you do 140, and it's immediately giving you a very aggressive swing. But then if you pick something that is less aggressive, like I accelerated and got into a more gentle wave, so 148 is one of the most relaxed tempos. So you should be able to swing along with that with very little effort. And it holds for lower tempos, and it holds for very higher tempos. Okay, I guess 150 is about the max for that. 150 is an extremely laid-back tempo. $171, that's such a laid-back tempo that it's just sort of a flag waving in the wind practically. In theory, you could play along to this. But you need to keep chill if you're going to match this tempo. You can't tense up or it starts coming out wrong. Whereas much tenser. And that's the way they work. Like there's 99. 99 super laid back tempo. Whereas slowed down to get more tense. And that's basically just how they work. And then you can exaggerate flavor as well. And you can switch, say the card game that I'm coming up with has a few cards that are about switching tempos to like semi-related tempos, and that it's shifting up or down a gear, like if you were going to do the polymeters or something. But either keeping the vibe the same or going to the opposite feel. So it automatically compensates for the type of feel that that tempo seems to want to do. And that's how that works. And on that note, I think I'm about ready to close up shop and go have my tacos and have dinner. And I encourage you to go have whatever kind of dinner you're going to have yourself, assuming that people are going to have dinner. Yeah. So these are weird, tricky days for me, seeing as I've got all of that like tax-related stuff going on. One thing about it, at least, I'm keeping things very simple in that I always am telling the tax people, just be a complete straight arrow. I have nothing to hide. Work it out exactly the way it wants. If I owe money, I want to be paying the money. And just be completely straight in every possible way. So they don't have to do anything tricky with me, but I do make them read all of my receipts and stuff and fill it out for me and know what they're doing. So I have a little bit over a week to find out whether I'm in trouble or not, but it will be trouble in the sense of not getting help with rent, rather than trouble in the sense of I did a terrible thing and bad things are going to happen as a result of that. I'm doing everything as right as I possibly can. And I'll see how it works out. Like in 2 weeks I'll know. And I'll see how that develops. But for now, I will probably be showing up the end of Thursday. I have a jam session on Thursday. Somebody's coming over and playing my keyboards, and I'll see how that goes. If it goes well enough, I could stream it, but I'm not looking to try to stream it the very first time. But then I'll probably tune in afterwards. You'll see whether I'm all excited or not. And it will be pretty much exactly, well, no, it'll be exactly a week before my big drama is going on. So we'll see how that goes. And then I'll log on and stream a little bit after I've done that, just to check in. Maybe I'll do some more of the reverbs if I'm too frantic and need to keep myself occupied. I'll just run through a bunch of these reverbs I'm busy doing so that I can then show you what the noise floors of those reverbs sound like. Because again, that one's unusually flat. But the ones that are less flat, or the ones that are a little weird, are going to have more interesting noise floors. They will have more interesting resonances, and the room tone of the more unusual reverbs is going to have more interesting characteristics going on. And it'll probably sound more like a room, rather than being fairly generic. But yeah, in any case, I will talk to you later, and I'll figure out something to post for this weekend. And most likely I'll check in on Thursday. And I'll probably be commenting to my Blue Sky periodically and stuff like that. Hey, Finn1258. So I'm going to go off and have my tacos now. Bye-bye.